Welcome to the Moulding Private Practice Show, where we help healthcare practitioners in private practice keep true to their purpose and build a life of mastery by providing the knowledge, skills, and tools to bring their dreams to life. In this episode of the show, we speak to Candice Janks about being a counselling psychologist and everything private practice management related. Candice Janks, welcome to the show. We're really glad to have you on board. Thanks very much for doing this.
Thank you so much. Glad to be here.
We've been talking about mindfulness in the other episode on the Moulding Health Show, and I love the topic. And just for the audience, I just want to ask Shaz, how did she twist your arm to be on the show?
To be fair, I didn't have to twist Candice's arm at all. Candice's name stuck out to me. I think at some point she may have trialed our SB Matrix practice management software. But when I was looking for somebody to speak to about mindfulness, Candice's name came up in my LinkedIn. So I popped her a message on LinkedIn and she answered almost immediately saying she'd love to be on the show.
Thanks very much for doing this. I always ask when Shaz tells me this stuff about LinkedIn, because we've connected with many practitioners on LinkedIn. And normally when I ask practitioners about LinkedIn, they never say LinkedIn is their social media platform of choice. Is it yours? Okay.
I've only recently learned how to turn the notifications off my LinkedIn profile. Otherwise, I probably would not have seen a message, because I never go in there. I just literally go in to get rid of my notifications. So it's not something I utilize at all. It's an amazing tool, and I'm so glad it's useful. I know it's changed the landscape for so many people in their careers and professionally, but no. Not what I utilize mainly.
Okay, cool. Yeah, thanks for saying that. So we must just hope that other practitioners are not turning off their notifications, so Chaz can manage to connect to them. But so the other question I always ask, and I love the responses on some of these, but when you were little, people always seem to have asked you this, but normally it's like at a family function or something, and they say, what do you want to do when you grow up? And so what did the young Candice say? Did she say psychologist?
So young Candice said she wanted to be a mermaid before it was a psychologist.
Wow.
But yes, when I grew up slightly older than 5, I said I either wanted to be a psychologist or I wanted to be a game ranger. So it was either going to be working with animals or working with people. People won. But I think everybody's reasons for going into the field are not the same. It's not, I just want to help people. I think there's a big misunderstanding around that. For me, and the reason why I was drawn to psychology is I believe that in the world where we are all clamoring to be heard, and there's so much talking that's going on, nobody's listening anymore. And I really believe in the value of listening and being heard. And then there's also the element of showing up exactly as you are, not who you're supposed to be, not who you think you should be, not what society dictates you need to be, as I am right now, and that's enough. And I think that is a gift that therapy offers many people, where you don't have to have it all together, you don't have to feel or be a certain way. This is where I am right now, and that's okay. And that permission, as well as being heard and seen, is everything. I think it's powerful.
What I like about the psychology discipline, though, is we had someone, and he was from New Zealand, and he was in a show, and he took a very science. He was actually doing science, and he stumbled onto psychology, and he said that was amazing. And I think that is amazing about it. The amazing thing about it, it's a very science orientated thing, and you couple that with what you just said now, the people aspect. It's actually, so for anyone listening to this and wanted to consider psychology, I think it's not just about the helping, it's about the, like how you fix a problem, in a different way. It's like, almost engineering, they fix it in a different way as well. But I think people don't realize that, they always think, psychologists, they just talk to you, but there's a lot of solving and using patterns and using, tools. We spoke about mindfulness, which I'm hoping we talk about in this as well, in terms of why that's an area of interest for you. But all of those things, you take all of these tools and you kind of solving, real problems and real people. This is not like television. It's like, it's real stuff. Is that what draws you as well to it at the moment?
Yeah, very much so. Very much so. I often say to my clients in our very first and then like initial session that I don't believe people come to see me because they're broken and need to be fixed. I think we hit potholes along the way. I think life can be incredibly demanding and challenging, and it helps to create a space that is, one, just for you. When is the last time you had an hour that was just about you, for you, and not about the million roles and responsibilities and things that you need to be taking care of, just about you, but also the space where you can see things from maybe a fresh perspective, hear somebody else's point of view, but it's not about giving my 5 cents, and it's not about telling you who or what to be. A lot of the time when we speak to our loved ones, we're constantly taking into consideration how what we say impacts them, right? If I tell you this, is it going to be a burden? Or are you going to look at me differently? In therapy, you're not worrying about that. You take that out. You take the judgment out. You take the criticism. You take the potential fear of what this can do to our relationship. You take that all out. And that can also be incredibly healing, where there's space to explore these things without worrying about the ramifications of it.
Yeah, from my own therapy experience as well, like what is nice is it's like having people like yourself, or your therapist on your side, and it's like that is like another ally that you have. And I know we spoke about you subscribe to the psychodynamic modality, and I like that modality as well because it almost like forces you to be in that structure. You mentioned like a client of yours that pitches up at 5:00 every Thursday, and that's what they do. And it's almost like you train your mind that actually this is your space, this is your time. And, it took me a while to kind of understand that, but it actually is amazing. So even when people want to, like I did, you want to like stop therapy, and then, the therapist always asks you like, so why are you doing this? Like, is it because you want to prioritize something else? And at first I thought it was like, like they were just like being, I don't know, it was an ulterior motive. But when I think about it, it was more about, but you're not giving yourself the time or the freedom and permission to be in that space. And that you have to ask the question, why is that the case? And I thought that was amazing. So really glad in terms of, like how, how you've kind of figured out the therapy and, being in that space. But was that route quite easy? I mean, like from the time you decided you're not going to be a mermaid to like when you actually got your qualification?
No, it's not easy at all. I think it took me 5 years to get into masters. So undergrad, easy enough to get into. Honors, depending on the university, not too challenging. Masters is a whole different ballgame. And I don't know how many people have spoken about their journey of masters on the show, but it's real. It's a real obstacle in pursuing this career. And I don't know, I sometimes worry, or I wonder if somebody had told me how difficult it was going to be, I don't think I would have listened anyway, because there's nothing else I wanted to do. Not really, because say I wanted to be a game ranger, but there's still time for me to do that on on the side. But I don't think I would have changed my mind on doing this. It's just, it would have helped to know that it's not just progressing one stage after the other, that there are so many elements at play. And the master selection is incredibly grueling. It is incredibly challenging. And there are so many people that want to get in and only X amount of spots. So it definitely wasn't a smooth, linear process of ticking off boxes and moving from one to the other. There was a lot of questioning in those 5 years that until I got into masters. What do I do instead? And what else is out there? And what does this mean? And a lot of searching and a lot of doubt and a lot of trying to figure it all out. Glad it all worked out in the end, but it's not a smooth process for many people.
Candice, you're right. You're not the first one who's actually mentioned that. Undergrad and honors was straight, it's linear, it's no problem. But then that master's process of just getting accepted. One of the psychologists that I worked very closely with for a long time, also it took about 6 or 7 attempts just to get into that master's. And in between then, you kind of have to go, well, I need to earn a living. What do I do? And she actually wound up going into psychometry just so that she had, it was a skill, it was a job that she could do. She knew she was going to be a psychologist come hell or high water, but at least there was something she could do whilst waiting to get into that master's program. Was there anything that you kind of went into in those 5 years when you were kind of going, okay, well, maybe this won't happen?
The exact same thing. It was recommended by a lecturer when we asked in our honours year, what do we do if we can't get in? The option was do psychometry or to go study law. I was like, well, if I wanted to study law, I would have studied law. So no, that's not an option. So yes, I did psychometry. The difficulty with psychometry is that psychologists can do all the things that psychometrists can do. And if you go into corporate, the HR department or HR tools are being used in recruitment. They don't necessarily need a psychometrist. And if you go into the educational side of schools, educational psychologists have it. So it's quite a niche field, psychometry. It's needed, it's there, but other people are kind of fulfilling those roles. So it wasn't that easy to find work as a psychometrist because other people were filling those roles. I found work and I got great exposure to different areas. I worked in education, I worked in corporate, and I'm very grateful. So when I did finally get into masters and then I did go into private practice, I had some, some experience in different sectors, not just coming from straight from studying into private practice. So I'm very grateful in retrospect for those years of experience. But it was also hard to go, it's all going to work out, it's all going to work out, it's all going to be fine.
You know, I'm really glad that you said that you know, it's not as easy to just, okay, well, I'm going to become a psychometrist. But having had those 5 years where you were actually practicing as a psychometrist, did you find that when you now got through your master's, you became a fully qualified psychologist, that at least you had almost the foundation for a referral network that you could almost go back to because they knew you from your days as a psychometrist?
Yep, definitely. I haven't actually had tons of referrals from those years of my life, to be honest, but it did help me gain the confidence to go into private practice off the bat. It helped me grow as a person. So those 5 years of figuring out what environments that I wanted to work in, what my, the goal was become a psychologist. I didn't think, okay, well, once I'm a psychologist, then what area am I going to focus on? How am I going to work as a psychologist? How does this work? How does this look? I was just like, become a psychologist. That's it. So that also, those environments helped me work out which way I wanted to go in terms of, did I want to be in the corporate space? Did I want to be in employee wellness, which is something I ended up doing? Did I want to get back into education? So it wasn't wasted time. Again, I can say that now. Those years, I was like, all these people are getting in and I'm not getting in and I'm wasting my time. It was never a waste of time. You only learn about yourself in these experiences.
Yeah, it must be quite hectic. I mean, we're talking about psychology, but it must be quite hectic on the ego, hey? And just questioning yourself, in every single year. Because what's amazing about that is not intellect or marks or how, whether you did, cum laude in honors, it's just some other, magical, metric that they use, that the board uses to determine who's going to do, this year. And so, yeah, from an emotional point of view, I feel quite sorry for, people going through that. But I have to ask, I mean, so you had this in your mind that you had, you want to become a psychologist, and you mentioned attorneys, I was listening to something and it said, during the time when LA law was around, there was like more people signing up for it to be an attorney, because it looks so glamorous and all cool. Same with the doctor programs, like Grey's Anatomy. So everyone wants to become a surgeon. But was there something that drove that desire to become a psychologist in private practice?
No, nothing that stands out for me in terms of that. I mean, I love my medical shows, so I like my legal shows, but I think I really do believe it's growing up again in this country, I think has a big part to play. And tapping into stuff that we don't spend a lot of time with. I grew up in a home where there was a lot of love and support and encouragement, but there wasn't a whole understanding of emotions and the permission to feel what you're feeling. It was, if this isn't, if you're in a bad mood, go to your room until you can be pleasant to be around. And by no means am I blaming my parents for anything. They're incredible, but there is the sense of, I grew up believing that I had to be a certain way in order to belong or to be accepted, and I wanted to offer a space again to be seen and heard as you are, how you are, and that's enough. As well as uncover all of the stuff that is not necessarily spoken about or seen or heard, but still has an impact on how I show up in this world and how I show up in my relationships.
Candice, you mentioned a little bit earlier that, those 5 years gave you the courage to go into private practice straight off the bat. Were there any challenges that you faced, though, when you were now going into private practice as a psychologist? Could you just elaborate on what some of those might have been, if there were any?
For sure, because in all the years that we were studying psychology, all those 3, 4, 5, 6 to 7 years of psychology, none of that was business 101. None of that was economics, finances, accounting, not one subject in all of that. So now you're going into private practice, starting your own business. I had no idea what I was doing in terms of how do I send an invoice and how do I register and what do I need to say on my business card. A lot of that came out in my internship year. We spoke to, supervisors, and it was building connections with my lecturers who were in private practice, asking them, finding out obviously the HPCSA guidelines for a lot of this stuff, and then also speaking to people who had opened their own businesses, whether it was psychologists or other people in small businesses, figuring out their do's and don'ts. So I spent a lot of time initially asking questions, setting up meetings, business owners, as well as psychologists in private practice already, how they did it, what do you need to do, how do you build up a referral network, how do I do this? So it was asking people who were already doing it in the field, as well as those in other fields, but who were running their own business, their ins and outs.
That is the amazing part, although like they don't teach you the business stuff, it seems, but there's definitely these invisible mentors that seem to appear, or these guides. And almost everyone collaborates the story that you just said now. There's these people that help them. And I think that's pretty amazing, about that, whether that was a supervisor or, as you said, the professors or stuff like that. And I think, from what you just said now, it seemed like your own initiative as well is to, and maybe that's the corporate experience kind of coming in, but, trying to find a solution to it. But that was quite brave. Going straight into private practice. But before you did that, I'm assuming you had to do ComServe as well? Did you? So
as a counselling psychologist, you don't have to do ComServe. Okay. A counselling psychologist, you do, it depends on the program. So my master's was 2 years and an internship. So it was 2 years full-time master's plus 1 year internship. And then your clins will do another year of ComServe on top of that internship.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. And was there a reason that you went straight into private practice? You didn't want to work somewhere else?
So I think my internship really helped me go into private practice, because I realized I'll never work this hard ever again. And I would rather work this hard for myself than for somebody else. So I think, again, my age and the fact that I didn't just go straight from studying into this helped. So I had some work experience. That was definitely helpful. And then just the feeling that I had in my internship year, probably the hardest year of my life for a variety of reasons, not just the internship year, but knowing that if I wanted to make a go of this before I started a family, before I was paying off a bond and go give it your all. And if it doesn't work out, you can go get a job. And I've been saying that now for 6 years. If this doesn't work, can still get a job, and my doors are still open, which I'm very grateful for. So
yeah, that's amazing. I mean, she has asked about challenges, and I think if you can get through the first 2 years or so, normally, like you get a sense of what this is about and the ebbs and flows, because I mean, it's, as you said, the business side, and every business has its ebbs and flows and seasonality and all of those kind of things. But yeah, I think over the last few years, I mean, especially with COVID and moving more to a remote setting, I think the psychologists have been, in our experience, with with the clients that we work with, I mean, seem to have been busier, and I think there's a huge need for psychology. I think that, coupled with what we spoke about in the other show, mindfulness, and the whole employee/people wellness or mental wellness, I think are really good trends for psychologists. Have you found the same? Has things changed over the last 2 years or so?
Very much so. So there was almost this calm before the storm when we were in the midst of lockdown and COVID, where, and I don't know if other practitioners felt the same, but there was almost a quietening down, because we were so busy trying to survive it. It was, I don't have time to process this. I don't have time to figure out what this is. I need to survive this. I need to keep a roof over my head. I need to keep myself from killing my teenager, whatever it was that was happening in our family systems and dynamics and everything that was shifting. So there was almost a pulling back, that I didn't have the time, the energy, the resources to be tapping into, how does this make me feel? And then when we got through the worst of that, then there was that increase, because now it was almost this unearthing and this uncovering what this whole change and what this pandemic has brought up for us, like I say, unearthing. Then there was the exploring and the processing and the delving into it, and that's when the flood of stuff came in.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and it seems to be the similarity with the story as well. I think initially, it was around that in South Africa, that March to April, it was also the whole telehealth and everyone trying to figure out the Zoom thing and Skype and WhatsApp and whatever else. But yeah, that seemed to be, and what was quite funny about that is, like, for instance, there's someone that we know, and my wife's a psychologist as well, and the one therapist was, I mean, she's she always said, like, this therapist would never ever consider technology, because she's very psychodynamic, and when she sent through a request where she wanted to do WhatsApp, I was like, okay, maybe the world is changing.
We got to adapt.
Yeah, exactly. Because especially psychodynamic, I mean, like, they're very certain. The couch must be like southeast facing and all of that stuff. But you can't change that stuff. Even my wife, I mean, like, sorry, you were saying?
No, but
No, I was saying, when she first set up private practice, like, all of the ornaments must be like in a certain, like, and you couldn't change it, because that would be, so even if someone came and cleaned the room, they couldn't, like, move it around, because it would obviously mess with the mojo for all of the patients. But she's a lot more calmer about that now.
I was one of those. I was very anti technology and very anti the there's something also about the structure and the space itself that you come into. Spend a lot of time cultivating how hopefully calming and peaceful the space is. But there's something about switching into that gear of, I'm sitting in therapy now. This is, like, I suppose, embodying it, versus trying to have a conversation with me, but you can't really talk about what you want to talk about because somebody's in the room next door, or whatever the case may be. I was struggling a lot with my teenagers, who I work a lot with adolescents, and they were struggling to be honest and open about what was going on, because mom and dad were right outside. So there was definitely an impact in terms of moving virtually, but it has also opened it up that clients who don't want to necessarily travel, or who can't travel at peak hour times, can now see me virtually, or clients who have moved overseas I can see virtually. So I've definitely had to adapt myself. That being said, first time clients I would always prefer to see face to face, because there's so much that you miss in the virtual connection. That would be my first prize. But if that's not an option, and you can attend therapy at least virtually, then we'll take it. You have to move with the times.
Yeah, I love that, because what, for me, as and as a society, what it does is it opens up channels to people, amazing people like yourself. You know, like even if you were in Durban and you heard about, you know, Candice Janks, and you said, you know, and I said, you know, like you really want to work with her. You know, even if you were in Durban or if you were somewhere else, you know, you can actually do that. You know, and 3 years ago that wasn't possible, and that
Exactly.
is incredible. I mean, I think
Yeah.
for society as a whole, I think. The one comment I got, and I don't know if this, you know, if you can relate to this, but someone said, you know, in a Zoom session, like if we were sitting in a room and there was a silence, it wouldn't be an awkward silence if it was just a few seconds. But on Zoom, for some reason, if someone stops talking, you're immediately checking your internet connection, and you know, something is wrong. Do you find the same as well?
Very much so. So not with the clients that I've worked for, you know, a long time with, because I know, and I say that just talking about mindfulness, and I must go in with a beginner's mind each time. So don't make assumptions and don't know how things are going to be. But those that I'm more comfortable with, I know the nuances of the dynamics in the relationship and those pauses. But when it's somebody new, or it's we're only a couple of sessions in, then I'm like, did I freeze? Did you not hear me? Did it? Yeah, definitely. It's a distraction in the process, in the natural flow of it. But everyone's aware of it, and I think it's just one of those things that we deal with.
So Candice, you mentioned mindfulness, and Oliver mentioned psychodynamic. When you went into private practice, and so how do you build up a private practice around a speciality like mindfulness or psychodynamic therapy?
I don't think I have. So I'm also still, I'm still amazed that you found me and found a connection to this topic, because I didn't realize that was out there. So psychodynamic is mainly because of my training. You know, my lecturers were psychodynamically orientated. There was an actual fit for me in psychodynamic, and beyond Freud, who everyone knows Freud, but not so much the other guys that came after Freud. So that training definitely helped me in terms of psychodynamic, but it's not something I advertise or put out there. It's just my natural way of discussing things, and if a client asks me, I'll speak about it. The mindfulness part has definitely been out of practice in terms of my own journey in terms of yoga and understanding the mind-body connection more, CPD training courses, and just my engagement outside of actually the psychology room, if you will, outside of therapy, that has helped me now bring it into therapy. So it's actually other areas of my life. I have done retreats with a friend of mine who's a yoga instructor, and I bring in the mind and she brings in the body. And through that, I'm now incorporating it more into my private practice space.
That's quite cool. You know, the whole positive wellness, or positive, you know, psychology part, which is quite nice. I like that. Coming back to the private practice part, and you know, I like to almost talk about these things because there's lots of the things that, you know, probably practitioners don't talk about, but you know, things like billing and unpaids and building up a referral network. Was there anything around there that you know, if you were guiding someone now, you would say, you know, watch out for that, or watch out for this, or you know, this is probably how you would do that? Is there anything that springs to mind there?
Nothing that's you know, that I would necessarily want to give advice on. Just about admin in general is not everybody's favorite thing. So, and admin's going to be part of any job anyway. So if you don't feel like you're admin strong, bring in somebody or some tool or some software or something that's going to help you in terms of admin, because it's always going to be a part of the process and a part of your business. So I'm lucky where I am quite admin strong. I don't mind the admin. And whilst I definitely don't love it, and it doesn't give me warm, fuzzy feelings, I'm happy enough to do it. So, and I'm quite conscientious and I'm quite structured in the way that I do things. So that's something that works well for me in my own business. But I know a lot of my friends and colleagues, that's not their thing. They just want to do the job. They want to do their work. So it is then about finding somebody, either a practice manager or, like I say, software and tools that you can use to make that process easier for you. I think also I have people that help me with my tax, accountants that help me with my tax. That's something I'm not even going to pretend to one, be interested in, or to know enough about. So I make sure that my books are all in order so that they can help me with my provisional tax. Beyond that, I run it all myself in terms of my own billing, my own Excel spreadsheets, making notes of bad debts, that kind of stuff. I feel like I'm still small enough for now to handle it all myself, and that's also I'm fully aware that that's my stuff, and not wanting to delegate or that murkiness of that stuff. But I think you need to know, if your admin's strong, how to keep on top of it, and if you're not, how can you get the support that's going to work best for you? I think that would be my 5 cents in terms of the admin side of business.
I think it's so important that you mentioned it that way, because we've spoken to a couple of practitioners who, like you said, like yourself, are admin strong. So, the admin to begin with isn't that much of a problem. And because they've had previous work experience, they find that doing the admin's a lot easier. But that exact same concept of, if you're not admin strong, rather when you start out, so that your practice starts on its best foot, find somebody who can help with it. Otherwise, 2 years from now, you have a practice that's really not on the right footing because the admin's all over the place.
Exactly.
But on a similar question to what Oliver asked, if a young teenager, somebody in their early 20s, was thinking of going into psychology, what nugget or word of wisdom would you give them about the process of becoming a psychologist?
I think it would be, one, you have to want it. You have to want to do this. It's not something, some people will call it a calling, whatever. You have to want to do this, because if you don't want to, if you think it sounds glamorous or you think it sounds cool, it's not. It's not those things. It's the most rewarding, humbling job in the world, and there's nothing else I'd rather do. But you have to want it, because that's going to get you through the dark times, the scary times, the uncertainty, the downs, all of that kind of stuff. So I suppose my big thing in that is you have to want it. And then you also need to know, how do you want to practice? So private practice also sounds all fine and well, but what does that mean? What does that mean to you? How does private practice look for you? Do you want to do it in conjunction with other therapists so that you've at least got somebody to have a cup of coffee with? It's very incredibly lonely job to do. I'm an introvert, so it works for me. But I can't talk to anybody about what I'm doing other than my supervisor. So I can't talk about the day I've had. I can't talk about what's going on. It's incredibly isolating. I thought the dream was to be in private practice full time. That's all I did. Now I know that I wouldn't want to just see 8 clients a day in my office on my own. I love doing the group work. It balances out really well. I love doing the corporate work when I did that. There's so much that feeds into my private practice. It's not just 8 hours of seeing one client after the other. So I suppose it's also then going, I want to be a practice. How do I want to practice? Who do I want to practice with? What kind of work do I want to get stuck into? Whatever that may be. So outside of the modality that you're using, what population do you want to be working with and why? And that's also then going to feed your referrals.
Well said. I think, even as you said, that there's a lot of that intentional aspects to it, like actually thinking about it and not just going into it blind. But yeah, I love this conversation, loved everything about it. Shaz, anything that we should have asked Candice that we didn't?
No, I think we covered the topic of private practice and the sheer willpower that it takes to make it through a psychology degree. It's always eye-opening. I can hear it 1,000 times, but every time it opens your eyes as to, this isn't a career that you just land in. So thank you so much for that, Candice.
Pleasure.
And Candice, on your side, I know you said it really nicely now with the intentional aspects, but anything around private practice or being a psychologist that you thought we should have asked you that we didn't?
No, I think everything's been covered. Thank you.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks very much for doing this. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and wisdom with us. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you. Love being here. Thank you so much.
Thanks very much, Candice.
Thanks, Shaz.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening. As always, stay tuned and we'll speak to you in the next episode.